Welcome to the Redemptive Economics Podcast, where we are empowering Christian entrepreneurs to make a redemptive economic impact here in Pittsburgh and beyond.
Let's get to work!
Hey, welcome to the show. I am your host, mhatch, and welcome back. I am grateful, especially grateful on this Thanksgiving week that you join me. Today I am going back to the devotional way of doing things, and I took a break last week just to talk a little bit about, expound upon the significance of Grove City College adopting Bitcoin. If you haven't listened to that, I encourage you to go back and listen to it, especially if you're in the Pittsburgh region and interested in some of the incredibly redemptive things that are happening here in Pittsburgh. Big things happening. Anyway, so I wanted to, though, specifically today, talk about, as we're thinking through Thanksgiving Day, the things that we are thankful for, and looking ahead. A lot of us are looking ahead to 2025. Already, I'm sure, starting to think through your goals, your New Year's resolutions. What are some of the things that you want to accomplish in 2025? These things are already starting to run through all of our heads, and so I wanted to get out ahead of that, and I wanted to encourage you on one main point. I wanted to encourage you to consider or focus on who rather than what. Focus on who rather than what. Now again, Thanksgiving is coming up, and it is so easy, at least it is for me on Thanksgiving Day, to think about all the things that I'm grateful for. Now, of course, that includes people, relationships, very meaningful things, family, but there are other things that often, I think, when we think about being grateful for things, that we think about things. We think about, my car that gets me to and from work, my house that we get to live in, the fact that we might have, we've been profitable this year and have extra savings. You name it. There's all sorts of different things we can point to that we can be grateful for, right? And we do that often around this time of year. And there are other parts of the year as well. I think it's been emphasized the significance of having a grateful heart and how that leads to a more fulfilled life, a longer, more satisfying life, and a healthier life overall. However, I would contend that often being thankful for certain things can actually lead to more pride. It can kind of be the equivalent of a little kid grabbing, someone's hand, a friend's hand, a parent's hand, and pulling them into their room and showing them all the things that they love, that they have in the room, all their toys, if you will, I think about it sometimes like that. Like sometimes my heart can be deceived even in gratitude, if that makes any sense, where it's more about all the things that are in my life that I'm grateful for, that I believe God provided for me. And for me, at least, I struggle there with pride as a result of that. And I think that's why, for me, I choose to focus, especially this year, making a very intentional effort to focus on the who rather than the what. In our Truth at Work roundtables this month, we've been doing an exercise revolving around the stones of remembrance from Joshua chapter 4, So I'm going to read the first 9 verses of this chapter, and this is what we've used, again, in our Truth at Work roundtables as a model to remember who, namely God, and the things that He has done on our behalf. So Joshua chapter 4 picks up right as Israel is crossing the Jordan, and a miraculous thing happens where God stops the flow of the water of the Jordan, which it mentions was at flood stage. So this is no joke. And God typically does this. He will stack odds against him so that it's clear that it was him that was doing it, right? And he did this in this situation. He had the Israelites walk into the river, the Jordan River, and as literally that their feet were as they're wading into the river, the flow of that river stopped, and it says it is stacked upriver somewhere, indicating that something must have happened. Who knows how it worked, but somehow that water was held up where they couldn't see it. They couldn't see what was going on, but they knew where they were walking across. Suddenly the river stopped, and they were able to walk across the riverbed without the river impeding them. So in verse 1, it picks up, it says, "When the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, 'Choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests are standing, and carry them over with you and put them down at the place where you stay.'" Jeff Doherty with Allstate Insurance has the distinction of being the very first sponsor of the Redemptive Economics podcast, and I couldn't be happier to promote his services. I've known Jeff for many years now, both as his pastor and friend, and man, I can say with confidence that he is a man of strong faith who aligns well with the Redemptive Economics values. So reach out to Jeff. He can offer you options for a wide variety of coverage and services. He's committed to helping Pittsburgh residents assess their immediate and long-term needs and choose options that will help you achieve your goals. When you want to explore options for protecting your home, personal property, or financial future, Jeff Doherty is your guy. You'll find Jeff's contact information in the show notes. Hey, go grab a cup of coffee with him, get to know him, even if it's just to review your current coverage in case you need to make adjustments. And I promise you're going to love Jeff every bit as much as I do. And carry them over with you and put them down at the place where you stay tonight. So the priests had stopped with the Ark of the Covenant in the middle of where the river was, in the river bed. Of course, again, the river had stopped flowing. It was dry, and they stood there, and they were told to wait there while the Israelites, representatives from each tribe, were to go out to where the priests were standing in the riverbed and pick up stones from the middle of the riverbed. And that's critical. So it's not like they got to the other side of the river and they picked up stones from the riverbank where they crossed over and set up stones there. That might have in some ways sufficed the point of what God was trying to do, but he took it a step further and said, no, I want you to go to the river and pick the stones out of the river. And of course, stones that are in the river are going to look much different than stones that have been on the land for a while. And so clearly it would signify that something was significant. These stones were taken from the middle, like out where the river was flowing somehow, and placed upright or stacked where they were going to be staying the night. So Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said to them, go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan, where the priests were standing with the ark. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder according to the number of tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. So the Israelites did as Joshua commanded them. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, as the Lord had told Joshua. And they carried them over with them to their camp, where they put them down. Joshua set up 12 stones that had been in the middle of the Jordan at the spot where the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant had stood. And they are there to this day. So this is something that God had commanded the Israelites to do in order to remember what he had done for them. In our Truth at Work roundtables, we did just this, actually. I bought a bunch of stones from Hobby Lobby, and we all took turns around the roundtable writing on, drawing on, designing on these stones and with Sharpie markers in order to commemorate the things that we had seen God do on our behalf. So it's not as much about counting the blessings, in a sense, or the things in our lives that we're grateful for, but instead marking the moments in time where we saw God or experienced God move and work. Okay? There's a difference between those two things. So I would encourage you, as we're heading into Thanksgiving, which is literally tomorrow, to consider what God has done. Consider who. And what I mean by who is consider God in the ways that he has worked in and around you and through you and for you on your behalf and for his kingdom purposes. Now, as we look ahead to 2025 and we start thinking about what we want to accomplish, I want to encourage you toward the same thing. Not just about thinking of the things or the goals that we want to accomplish, but who. Think of who. Think of who, number one, in light of who God is and what he's done and what he's done in and through and for you, not least of which is your very salvation. Who does God want you to become in 2025? Who is God molding you into? Seneca Hills Bible Camp and Retreat Center is a hidden gem located just north of Pittsburgh in Venango County. Personally, when I attended their men's weekend, I was blown away by the beauty of the surroundings, the quality of the facilities, and the superiority of the cuisine. This is not your typical camp food, folks. Seneca Hills hosts year-round retreats and conferences, but their true passion is summer camp, where campers, both kids and adults, escape the everyday tyranny of screens and distractions and immerse themselves in 250 acres of God's gorgeous creation. Go to SenecaHills.org or call my good buddy, Executive Director Lyndon Fowler, to learn more about how Seneca Hills Bible Camp and Retreat Center can help you, your kids, or your business create unforgettable memories, meaningful friendships, and a deeper understanding of God's love. This year, I recently read the book Atomic Habits, and man, it was a fantastic book. And then it hit me as I was doing an interview recently with Pastor John Price. He's the pastor at Covenant Community Church in Wexford. We talk about liturgy. When we think of liturgy, we often think of liturgy within the church during a worship service, right? And that's primarily what I would think of as well. And I remember sharing with John that just attending Covenant Community Church has been very impactful on me. I've told him over and over again that the liturgy, the elements and the order of the service, the intentionality behind it, the scripture, the music, and the lyrics to the worship have just been transforming for me personally. So the liturgy of the worship service has changed me, has impacted me. And ultimately, the book, Atomic Habits, what it's talking about is liturgy. Because what it's saying is that habits are more important than goals. Who you are becoming is more important than what you achieve. In fact, it should be reversed. It should be what you achieve should come from who you are becoming, who God is molding you into, who you are being developed into, should lead you to the appropriate goals. If you don't focus on who God is and therefore who you need to be becoming, then there's a high likelihood that the goals you set may not be the correct goals. They may not be the most appropriate goals for what God is calling you to or who God is calling you to be. So these habits that are talked about in Atomic Habits, it's liturgy is what it is. It's the daily practices, rituals, habits that we incorporate in our lives make us who we are today. The things that you've done consistently over time, day in and day out, week in and week out, every single year has contributed to who you are right now. Who is that? Especially in light of who God is. Who is it? Who are you? Who have you become? I think that's the first thing we must consider during the season as we're thinking about the next year. Who are you right now? Who has God turned you into, in a sense? And who is he calling you to be moving forward? And as a result of that, once we are secure and have found that solid footing in our identity in Christ, then I think the goals that God is calling us to accomplish can flow from that and be much more appropriate and intentional and effectual, as in they will have great effect for God's kingdom purposes. So along with who you are, what are the habits and practices and rituals and liturgies that you've allowed to form who you are today and made you into who you are today? And how do those things need to change in order to align with God's will and what he's calling you to in the future? For example, this last year, one of the things I've tried to work on is something called the Wim Hof method. And some of you may know what that is, some of you may not. I'll leave a link in the show notes. You can discover more if you want. But the basic premise is it has to do with breathing exercises and in cold temperature kind of training, whether it be a cold shower or an ice bath or exposure to cold outside during cold weather, etc. And the reason why I've embraced that method is because it is helping me to be more self-sacrificial. It's helping to energize me because it helps to lift my energy or to raise my energy levels over the course of the day. And it gives me a certain amount of endurance and stamina that allows me to be self-sacrificial or to crucify my flesh in some ways that God is calling me to, because I believe who I am is to be like Christ, is to be self-sacrificial, is to carry my cross and to be that sacrifice on behalf of my family, for the sake of my business and the people I serve in that business. TBD Bookkeeping is who I use for my bookkeeping needs, and I'm thrilled to recommend them to you. As business owners with 3 kids themselves, Ryan and Danielle Hatch understand the value of time and the importance of work-life balance. TBD Bookkeeping can take over the day-to-day bookkeeping of your business so you can focus more on growth, operations, and customer relationships. I can speak from experience. If you're a business owner, you need a bookkeeper, and TBD Bookkeeping is simply the best in the business. Find their contact information in the show notes, and when you mention Redemptive Economics, you'll receive 10% off your first 3 months. Call TBD Bookkeeping today and learn more about the benefits I've experienced: more time, peace of mind, and the ability to plan for the future. I am much less selfish, or much more selfless, when I am focusing on engaged on those practices, allowing those rituals or those liturgies of the order of events that I do every morning, for example, with regard to Wim Hof or exercise or things like that, it empowers me in ways to be self-sacrificial and to think outside of myself and to be able to focus on others. Because again, God has called me. Who has God called me to be? I am his son, his beloved son, first and foremost. But also I am called to crucify the flesh, die to self, to serve others, and to be Christ-like. And so these are some of the liturgies that I have implemented in my life in order to continue to work alongside what God is already doing in me in terms of forming me into who he wants me to be. So instead of thinking of the goals and what you want to achieve coming up here in 2025, I would challenge you to think about the liturgies, the practices, the rituals, the habits that you want to cultivate that contribute to who God is forming you into for his own kingdom purposes. Because look, if we're out of touch with who we are, right, and who God created us to be and who he's molding us into, the unique ways that he has gifted us, if we're out of touch with that, then most likely the goals that we're going to set for ourselves are going to be off target. However, if we are secure and built on the rock-solid foundation of our identity in Christ, then we're much more likely to identify the correct goals that God is looking for us to achieve. Because again, remember, we've got to submit our will to God's, right? We have to be willing to sacrifice ourselves and our own agenda for the sake of God's kingdom purposes in every aspect of our lives, personally, in our families, and in our businesses. Now, let me just finish with one last thing, and that is that there are some business leaders, business owners, entrepreneurs, folks who are influencing the culture of their organizations who've decided to make Truth at Work a part of their liturgy, their monthly liturgy. So every month for 4 hours, we gather together, work through holding each other accountable to not only our goals, but who we believe God is molding us into. So that ritual of being tied into this community of business leaders and spending time every single month together, that would be liturgy, is forming us as business leaders. And as we do that, we begin to discover the solutions to our toughest challenges in business, in our personal life, in our marriages, our parenting, through these confidential peer advisory groups. So if you are interested in that, please reach out to me. We are going to be having more than usual visitors coming in January this year, January 2025, to the groups that we have around the Pittsburgh region. I, again, facilitate 3 groups, one in Wexford Cranberry area, one in the South Hills near McMurray, and then one out in Greensburg. I would love to chat with you about whether a Truth at Work Roundtable would be a good fit for you, because there are limited spots, and we're very choosy about who is actually a good fit for these spiritual leadership communities. Let's get to work!